Hi guys, I am going to be doing a recording today. It's for parents and carers to basically help you, if you need it, create a feelings friendly home. So I've written some ideas down about the kind of things that I would do with children as a practitioner, but also the kind of things that I have in place for my daughter at home as well. So the first thing I've got on my list, and I think it's probably the most important thing to create a home where children feel comfortable talking about emotions, is to have an approach where that is kind of what you do. So that could be you talking about your feelings, obviously child appropriate, so you wouldn't be offloading your problems to your children, but you might pass comments that say, about your feelings, whether they're good or bad. For example, I had a really nice day today, I felt really happy because, or I feel really peaceful when, you can use positive emotions as well as negative, just to show that we all feel a range of different feelings, but also to give names to our emotions, because I think we assume that humans know how to talk about feelings, but it's like any skill really, and it's any knowledge that we have to be taught to be able to do something. It doesn't come naturally to us. So by modelling talking about our own emotions, it teaches children the names of feelings, what they feel like, the kind of situations that might give us those feelings, and when we talk about them, it just makes them safe, it makes them normal, it normalises a range of different feelings. I know I've already said this, but I just want to stress that you wouldn't talk about your anger while you were experiencing it to a child, because obviously it's a very powerful feeling and it's the kind of emotion that's best dealt with away from our children. But you might talk about it after, so you might say, I felt really cross when, and talk about a situation that might have happened to you at work or wherever that made you feel angry. And then you can talk about how you resolved that, so you can emotion coach your own response. You'll say, for example, you'll say, I felt really angry because whatever happened, but then I thought to myself, well, that kind of thing isn't going to last forever, and actually it's not really a big deal. And you can talk through how you managed that feeling and what you did, and you might even talk about what you do to make yourself feel calm. So you might say, but I took myself away from the situation and I felt loads better. And again, it just models a healthy response to emotions. I talk about emotion coaching because I know I just mentioned it in video number 16, so if you wanted to look into how to emotion coach your children, check that out if you like. Another thing that you can do, so I just want to stress, just to go back to what I've just said, actually your approach around feelings is the most important thing. So strategies, some of the strategies and techniques that I'm going to talk about now are brilliant and definitely use them, but the first thing I would do is embed a culture of talking about feelings. So just going back to the emotion coaching, the first step is to empathise with feelings, so you wouldn't react negatively to a child's feeling, no matter what it is. Even if it was anger, we want to go in with empathy and empathise, and all feelings are valid, even if we don't quite understand them or we don't quite agree with the behaviour. It's the emotion that we are concerned about, so all emotions are valid. And that is part of your approach to an emotion friendly home, where we accept a range of feelings. So it's okay to feel angry, it's okay to feel sad, it's okay to cry. If you have a child who's hurt themselves, let them cry. It's a perfectly natural and necessary response. I know sometimes as parents we worry that if we encourage crying, then we'll have a child that cries all the time. In my experience, that doesn't happen. When a child hurts themselves and they're allowed to cry and they get a cuddle, because, why wouldn't we? They learn a healthy response to expressing their feelings, offloading it there and then, and moving on. what can happen if we suppress a child's emotions. So for example, if a child isn't encouraged to cry or isn't allowed to cry, that leads to emotions bottling up and building up, and they will come out at some point later in life, whether it's a few months down the line or a year down the line. And we don't want that. We don't want bottled up emotion, because that's what kind of leads to tricky situations with a child's behaviour coming from those bottled up feelings. So we just want them to express the emotion as they have it. Crying is perfectly natural and essential. So yes, going back to the approach for an emotion friendly home is to allow a huge range of feelings, whatever they may be, and be very open about them. And you guys know your children better than anybody, so you know when there's something not quite right with your child, and sometimes they might not be ready to talk about it, and that's okay. But if you embed a culture of accepting all feelings, they will either have developed their own strategy for coping, or they will open up to you eventually. So try not to worry too much if a child doesn't want to talk about it right away. If you focus on embedding that culture of being open about feelings, it will come back to you. They will let you know one way or another. So I'm going to talk now about some strategies to encourage your children to open up. And again, it depends on the age of your child. The children that I work with are primary age, so they range from 4 up to 11. So some of these will work for some ages and some might not be as appropriate, but you can pick and choose. So I've already talked about expressing your own feelings and just making that dead normal. So just talk about how you feel. What you can also do is you can use a technique where you pretend that something has happened in your life either to you as a young child, or to somebody you knew at school, or if you know, like me, you have access to working with children, you can just make up that you know of a child. Basically, you're going to do a bit of a social story for your child. That sounds like lying, but it's not. It's a good technique to use, where you tell a story about a child who is in a similar situation to the situation that your child might be in, to encourage a bit of a dialogue. So for example, if I'm working with a child, or if my child seemed a little bit sad, and I had kind of an idea of why that might be, what I would do is I would just drop into conversation, so make it as natural as you can. And it could be, oh, you know, my friend's son or my friend's daughter, or in my case it'll be a child that I worked with, or a child when I was at school went through this phase of feeling really sad, and you know, they didn't quite know why. Some things had changed at school, one of their best friends had moved away, and you pick similarities that match up with your own child's experience. And whenever I've used this, they never catch on that it's actually them that you are creating a story about. And I find this very effective, because what children then tend to do is they become interested and they might volunteer information. So they might say, oh yeah, maybe they're just sad because of, you know, whatever, or maybe they are worried about, and we'll give an example of something they're worried about. In my experience as well, children are very they're unable basically to create a false story here. So what they might suggest will come from them, and it will be expressing their own feeling. What I would then do, depending on how open your child is, if they're very open, I might say, have you ever felt like that? Casually. And they often open up and say, actually, yeah, I do sometimes feel a bit like that. If you get the feeling that your child isn't yet ready to own those feelings, just leave it, because the conversation itself is enough for them to express that feeling in a space with you, and process it on some level. Even if they don't own up to, actually, yeah, that's me, I feel like that, their subconscious will have recognised it. And And even if they haven't consciously recognized it to themselves, it will still be working on a deeper level. So it's a very powerful way to get inside what's happening for your child. That is a bit sneaky, but very effective. Another way to do that with younger children is using a cuddly toy, and I know I did a video around that technique, a bit of a check-in where you have a cuddly toy and, you know, get your puppet or whatever and you say, oh, little Teddy's feeling a bit sad today, I wonder why, I wonder what could be wrong. And this can be during your normal play, so when you're playing with your kids with their cuddly toys, you say, oh, let's pretend that Sammy is feeling a bit sad or whatever, and I wonder what could have happened. And your children will take over. They'll say, oh yeah, somebody's been mean to him. And if your children start then making their teddies fight, as a parent we can sometimes be very tempted to stop that and say, oh no, play nice. I'd allow that to happen as long as they're not damaging the toys, because that could be their way of showing that actually their cuddly toys are showing how angry they're feeling, and let it play out. And you might ask some questions along the way of you know, oh, they do look really cross with each other. How come? What's happened? What's made them fall out with each other? And it's a really good way of digging under the surface and finding out how your child is feeling and what's happening in their life that they might not have otherwise told you. Another approach or technique that I use all the time with my daughter is through films and books. They are literally a wealth, a treasure chest of different characters. So when you're watching TV or when you're watching a film, make it natural to just drop into conversation, you know, a bit of a comment about a character, or like, oh, I love that character, I love how they are so strong, or I love how they are so kind to their friends, I love the relationship that those characters have with each other, where they stick up for each other, and they always come back together even if they've had a fallout. And you're modelling, talking about relationships and different characters and their feelings, and you're kind of modelling what's positive about them. It teaches children a dialogue of how to talk about feelings and emotions and look at behaviour and get under the surface of different characteristics. And sometimes you might ask questions like, oh, you know, if you could be any of those characters, which one would you be? Or how do you think that character feels? Or, you know, make it dead natural. You obviously don't want to be questioning your children when you're watching a film, but just drop it into conversation when you're watching a film. And I've found that that's a really good technique to teach children what feelings look like in behaviour, how relationships work, just different really positive traits. So you might see a character going through a really difficult time that your child could relate to. And I think I've mentioned this in, I think it was video 16 as well, how children will often relate to a story so much on a subconscious level that they'll want to see it again and again, whether it's a book or a film. And I would allow that to happen. And if there is a particular film that your child loves, I would watch it with them and ask them what their favourite bit is, and, you know, how does it make you feel when you see that happen. And it just, like I say, opens up a really good conversation about feelings that's not too close to home, so it won't feel too invasive. We're not questioning the and again, there's no judgment here, because I think we've all done it. Probably one of the least effective ways to get a child to open up is to sit them down and, like, come on, tell me what's happening, what you're feeling, because it just, you know, makes them want to shut down. A good thing though to have is a time to talk. So I know lots of different families will have their, you know, they might sit down for dinner and it might be their time where they just all chat. And you might make it a formal thing where you basically go around the table, you all talk about your day, or, you know, pick a feeling of how you would describe, you know, the most powerful feeling of the day, or has anything upset you today? So you could make it a formal thing, or you could just make it an informal chit chat about your day, about your feelings. Sometimes it might be a car journey. I know they're quite effective because you're in an enclosed space, nobody's running away, and it can just be a nice time to chit chat. Avoid interrogation though, just make it a nice natural conversation. And if your child shuts you down, doesn't want to talk, just accept that, that's okay. If your child isn't willing to talk and they don't want to talk about their feelings, you can kind of tiptoe around it. And what I do is I always give children permission to not tell me. It's probably one of the first things I will say. You don't have to tell me what the feeling is. You don't have to tell me what happened, but if you want to, obviously I'm available. What you can do though, if they're not willing to talk about it, just going back to that, what I find is by giving them permission not to talk about it, they normally talk about it. But if they don't want to, you can ask questions like, if your feeling was an animal, what would it be? Or if your feeling was an object or something, or a car, what kind of car would it be? And I know that sounds a bit unusual, but when you make the conversation not about them and their feelings, they're more likely to want to open up about it. So when you've got a bit of a conversation going and they tell you that their feeling would be, I don't know, a monster truck, or it would be a snake, you could say to them, where would it be? And just get a story going. Like in a lot of the videos I've done, stories are a brilliant way for subconscious feelings to process. A bit of a heads up as well, and I might have mentioned this in some of my other videos, children often don't know how they feel. They can't put a name to it. The feeling's too complex. It might come from nowhere. They might have had a bad day a week ago and not processed it, and then woke up a few days later with the after effects of it, feeling really grumpy and not quite themselves. So sometimes they won't know, in fact most of the time they won't know how they feel, which is why the techniques that I've done in my videos are quite effective, because they focus on the subconscious emotion rather than naming the feelings. But the techniques that I've given today are very good for creating emotion-friendly home. And when you do that, they are more likely to become in touch with their feelings and be able to pinpoint where that feeling started and where it came from. And that's another good way to get a conversation going. You can say, okay, you might not know what you're feeling, you might not know why you're feeling it, but when did it start? What day did it start? And you can start to backtrack a little bit of a timeline, and then you can maybe suggest things. You might say, was it because you fell out with somebody at school, or was it because you didn't get that homework done, or was it because, I don't know, you heard me and your dad arguing, or something like that. So you can kind of give some suggestions, but always make it okay that they don't know, and just say to them it's normal not to know. Don't worry about it, darling, come for a cuddle. Those kind of emotion coaching strategies of empathy. Okay, finally, if you can, obviously have that lovely emotion-friendly dialogue going on in your home where people are open about their feelings. You're not necessarily talking about feelings all the time, but you will talk about them daily, even if it's just in a one-word comment, or a one-sentence comment even. But also, what is really, really effective, like I've already mentioned, are the activities that I've done in my videos, because they do hit on a subconscious level. So let your children play, let them be creative, let them listen to stories and watch films and create stories and write and do whatever it is they do to express creatively. You don't always need to know exactly what emotions they're expressing when they're doing it, but just know and feel confident that that is what they are doing. I hope that's been of some use to you guys. I know it's not always easy. I think as adults we've often grown up in a culture, haven't we, where we suppress, we don't express our feelings. So it is quite common for our children to be feeling like that as well, but it's never too late to start. So like I say, I hope you found some use from that, and I will catch you guys later.